Away a little bit from oil, well, we're still going to talk about oil because it has to do with the growth of the economy. The Q2 2021 real GDP performance, as reported by the NBS, shows that Nigeria's economic recovery is on the right path despite current macroeconomic challenges. Given that GDP growth is a necessary condition for economic development, it also raises the prospect of inclusive growth, which promotes job creation and poverty reduction in the medium to long term. With the continuous moderation in inflationary trend for the fourth consecutive month, coupled with the latest development of GDP growth rates in the second quarter of the year, there is no doubt that this sends a positive signal to local and foreign investors regarding the resilience of the Nigerian economy despite security challenges. However, with the rising cases of the Delta variant, economists have recommended a cross-breed of structural and macroeconomic policy options that ensure that this relatively strong GDP growth is not only sustained but made inclusive. He joins us to look at this. He's the partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Dr. Andrew Nevin. Dr. Nevin, good afternoon, and it's good to see you.
Hello, it's great to be with you today.
Yes, we see the figures, 5.01% positive. That is what we have. After being negative for some time, we got out of recession in the fourth quarter of 2020. Inflation has also we've seen a decline in inflation for like 4 months. Would you say that it is time for full recovery, or we are on that path to full recovery?
Well, I think through the COVID period, Nigeria has done relatively well. I mean, in a full year, 2020 versus 2019, the economy only contracted 1.9%. I think it was about 8% in South Africa. So, I mean, I think we've shown our resilience. I mean, we all know the challenges, the issues that we have in the country, but I think this number, which represents the growth year over year in the quarter, so second quarter of 2020 versus second quarter of 2019, over 5%, a good bounce back. Obviously, we had a lot lower activity a year ago in the second quarter because of the COVID lockdowns. But you know, I'm optimistic. I mean, I think the other thing that's interesting, and of course, you've just had GMD, Mr. Dr. Kayari on talking about NNPC, was the decline in the size of the the oil sector, effectively oil and gas sector. They're only 7.5% of the economy, which is the lowest number we've ever seen. So, in fact, in a lot of sectors outside of oil and gas, we're seeing a lot of resiliency, and that's a great sign.
All right, let's move quickly to see what these figures are. Now, looking at by broad sectors, non-oil performance is also something that pricks me. We focus on agriculture. The figures from the agricultural space is not looking too good. What could be responsible for this?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of focus by both the government and non-government actors on agriculture for the last few years. We obviously had things like Anchor Borrower Program. We have a lot of private sector groups that are trying to do aggregation, outreach to farmers, helping them improve their yields, being the off-takers of it, and then building, of course, the agro-processing facilities. And then we have groups like AFEX, the commodity exchange, that's trying to make the whole supply chain system work more efficiently. And I think we're making good progress. I mean, but the primary issue in agriculture at the moment is security. So when there's insecurity and agriculture is spread over large areas, it's difficult. If people are not at their farms in the first stage of this, then we're not going to get the results. So I think, and of course, I'm not the only commentator saying this. I'm an economist. I'm not a security expert, but many people and many of the leading political figures are being very clear that so actually the number one issue for the economy is security. If we don't address security, there's nothing else we can do with economic policy that's going to compensate for that. And I think the agricultural sector in particular, just shows the impact of insecurity on the kind of growth that we expect. Because agriculture should be growing 7-10% a year, given all the effort that's going into it.
Let's look at OPEC and its impact. Of course, there's an impact of the cuts on price of crude, and this is also telling because the oil sector has been kind of depressed when you look at the figures coming in from the GDP space. What more do you think can be done? I think from next month we expect an increase of about 400,000 monthly. Do you see that as being maybe that would help revive that sector as it make it more active, more productive for the Nigerian economy?
Well, I mean, the PIA, so now it's an act, not a bill, of course, is a big step forward for giving clarity in the situation. I think the NNPC itself has done a fantastic job. I mean, they've audited accounts now, they've shown a profit. They've discussed actually listing on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which is something we mentioned, not at the NNPC level. We were thinking of the subsidiaries, but perhaps at the whole level to allow Nigerians to participate in the NNPC. But I think that Group Managing Director Kayari put it very well. He said, look, this really should be a gas economy. And we're underutilizing the gas. The gas is not just a question of exporting raw material. It actually industrializes the country in places where they have stable gas supply. You're seeing manufacturing spring up because they've got the gas supply, they've got the power that they need. So I don't think we should necessarily be aiming to produce a lot more oil. And of course, you rightly pointed out, Tolu, what's the long-term future of oil? So I mean, all of these stars are aligning to say, well, oil is not disappearing in the short term. It shouldn't be the primary focus of the country. In fact, you may make the argument that we should only be doing offshore oil because it doesn't pollute the communities. We should be focusing on gas, which is cleaner for the community, cleaner for the environment, on that. And I think that's perfectly consistent with what GMD Kayari was saying. So of course, I've been the one that's saying we're not an oil economy. Our biggest export is grains. But why don't we now say we're not an oil economy, we're a gas economy, we're a grains economy, and if we're a gas economy, we're also going to be an industrialized economy.
Trade is also very important, and I see that the sector also came out of the depression after 5 quarters of negative. 5 quarters. What is happening? When you say global trade has actually, is it back to normal? We hear production being kind of reduced, or kind of there's a reduction in production when you talk about China, America, and all of that, thanks to the third wave of COVID-19. So how do you see this affecting Nigeria one way or the other?
Well, I think that when we talk about trade, we're really talking about people that are distributors of goods, either at the wholesale level or at the retail level. That's what trade is. And of course, there have to be some goods to be able to distribute, right? But most of those goods we source from outside the country, as people are aware. My view of what's driving the trade is back to the diaspora. I mean, so in the official statistics, the World Bank told us that the diaspora remittances declined from 25 billion in 2019 to about 18 billion in 2020. I don't believe that number. I think what happened was that the Nigerian diaspora continued to send significant amount of money to Nigeria, but they're now doing it in much more of a informal way, if you want to put it that way. So it's not captured in the official statistics. But that purchasing power is what's driving trade. And I think it also calls into a whole question of these statistics. I mean, it's not easy for the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics to get an accurate number of GDP. We have over 50% of the economy is informal. It's hard to measure how much of the informal economy actually goes into the official statistics, some but not all. And of course, let's just give a big shout out to Dr. Yemi Kale, who just retired as the Statistician General of the nation after 10 years of fantastic service. He's absolutely brilliant. His replacement, Dr. Harry, has a long, distinguished career in the statistics, economic statistics. But I'm kind of in the camp that says I'm not sure we're capturing the full range of economic activity. And I'd like to see more measures that kind of depend on things that aren't waiting until after the quarter and household surveys, more real-time data gathering. So if you look, for example, during COVID, people are much more aware of mobile phone mobility patterns. Like if the mobile phone is moving, there's probably more economic activity. So are the things that we can start to do here in Nigeria to have a better view of the actual level of economic activity. It's not a criticism of the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, but just the way the statistics are done is the classical way. I mean, the other thing I'll add about this is we've just had a rebasing in South Africa. They've increased their economy by 11%. We're going to have another rebasing is coming up. I think it's scheduled for 2023. People who are old enough may remember the last rebasing. I think it increased by 50% because we were not capturing everything going on in the economy, and I still don't think we're capturing it. So, while people know I don't like to make predictions, if South Africa had an increase of 11% through their rebasing, I wouldn't be surprised if we had 15 to 25% on that. And this all sort of underscores, do we have ways of getting better statistics? But overall, I think there is a robust and resilient level of economic activity. So we have a headline number of 5% year over year in the second quarter. But we have cement sales up, I think, if you talk to Dangote and Lafarge, up about 25 or 30%. So there's clearly a lot of economic activity going on in the country.
How do you also react to growth in the telecoms and the IT space? What's your reaction to this? Because it's still slowed down for the sixth consecutive quarter, standing at about 5.9%.
Well, but still, it's 5.9%, right? So, I mean, it's still growing quickly. It can't grow at 10% or 15% for forever. I think the thing about ICT, in particular bandwidth, though, is very critical for us. We need more bandwidth because it is not just a consumption good, it also drives the export of services, the provision of IT services. So it's very critical to the economy. I mean, if we have one person, senior economist in government, put it, if we had more bandwidth, we just get people who are more programmers or coding for global companies, et cetera. So yeah, I think we continue to need investment in that, but I wouldn't be concerned about a slowdown. It was growing so fast before. And particularly, being driven by COVID and people shifting that, it's going to continue to grow fast, and it's a huge industry for export. Because I mean, one other point I want to make is we talk about the diversification of exports, but our position has been for the last year, 18 months, that the best path for exports for Nigeria is actually to focus on services. We all understand the problem with moving physical goods through the ports, through the infrastructure, the power issues we still have. But we're already exporting a lot of services, very high value added services, business processing, outsourcing, financial services. We have people like UBA, Access marching across the continent, InterSwitch, Paystack, though I think they're now owned by the Americans. But those companies are exporting services from Nigeria. And of course, we have the one that probably has the ones that have the most potential of all, which is our cultural services. So we have Nollywood, we have fashion, and of course we have music. Nigerians won 2 Grammy Award winners. So I'd like people to think about the export of services even more than they think about the exports of goods.
So moving on now, and with special concerns with regards to COVID-19, I like us to take that very seriously. The figures about 460 are roundabout thereabout for yesterday. Now, what kind of growth do you see? Do you see this impeding growth in any form moving on in 2021?
Well, I really hesitate to make predictions about such an uncertain future, and I really hesitate to make predictions about where COVID is headed. But, what do we know based on 18 months of experience? I mean, one thing we know is COVID is incredibly complex. It's morphed in ways. We have the new variants, the Delta variants, of course, that you talked about. Countries that we thought had come through COVID relatively, I don't say easily, but had come through robustly, found themselves in a very difficult position. India is one example, Indonesia right now, very tough time. So I don't know that we really know how many more twists in the COVID tail we're going to have. But we do know a couple of things. I mean, one thing we do know is all pandemics come to an end. I mean, there will be an end to this pandemic, and we all hope sooner rather than later. The second thing we know is Nigeria, both in a health perspective and economic perspective, has done quite well. I mean, if we take the health perspective, people may recall there were dire predictions by WHO and others about what was going to happen in Africa, in West Africa, because we don't have access to the same level of medical care, because we don't have access to the same level of vaccines. As tragic as COVID has been for the country, the reality is that the number of deaths we've suffered is much less than those people had said, and it's much less than other countries in similar conditions. I mean, if we contrast Peru, which I understand the official statistics has the highest number of deaths per million people officially of any country. Similar conditions to us, and yet we have a much lower number. So I don't know the reasons for it. I don't know if it's genetic. I don't know if it's environmental. But it seems like it is not affecting us from a medical viewpoint as much as others. And of course, as I said, we've had relatively robust economies. So I don't want to make a prediction, but I pray that we continue to have that situation. You can really see the economy moving on. I can also say I am impressed, certainly in Abuja. Maybe it's an outlier, but I'm based in Abuja now. The level of care people are still taking in terms of their personal habits and the way we conduct. When we do have a meeting, we have it with face masks, everyone's sanitized, temperature is taken in every place that you go. So all of this is, I think, a long way of saying that I think we've done really well, and I think the government has done really well at the state level, certainly when I was in Lagos at the beginning of it, and the federal level as well as doing this. So I'm optimistic that we will be able to come out with a strong economy, and as I said, all pandemics come to an end.
And hopefully price of foodstuff would also drop. Food inflation is worrisome. Let's end it up on that note. What do you make of that?
I mean, you go back to where we were before. The agricultural sector, despite all the efforts, is not growing in volume terms as fast as it should. I mean, that's just, and one major reason for that is because of the insecurity. So then, of course, you put in all these resources, and the output you get is lower than you want. So food is going up in price, and it's a problem. I mean, it's we've discussed in the show. I think that my understanding of the numbers is right. At least 50% of Nigerians spend more than 50% of their income on food. So it's food inflation, which is higher than the general inflation, which really matters. And it matters what is the food price in your community. So, again, we need to focus on the security situation. I mean, we also need the whole agro businesses to build out. We need to stop the wastage of food. We need to continue to have advances in the seed varieties we use, in the kind of outreach programs, farmer outreach, farmer support to make sure they're making the right decisions around seeds, around fertilizers. As I said, there's enough actors on this, and this country can easily grow. I mean, everyone listening and everyone in the country sees, I see out of my window here in Abuja, how fertile the country is. So food should be fixable, and I think we were really on the path to it before COVID struck and some of the more security issues, that we need to get back to a more secure Nigeria and just let all of the people working on the food industry progress it. And I know many people, I run into people almost every day who are trying to do something with agriculture on a scale that will matter to Nigerians, whether it's in the agro-processing side or in the growing side or in the input side. So I think it's happening. But it's been derailed by COVID, and it's been derailed by the security situation. And that's why we have so much suffering with food price right now.
Thank you so much for your time. I'll be speaking to Dr. Andrew Nevin, is a partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Tom. It's always a great pleasure to be with you.
All right.